All right, and we are live.
But seriously, this absolutely ruined probably one of the greatest freaking campaign settings known to man.
What are you holding
Like,
up?
I mean, huh?
What are you holding
I'm
up?
holding. This is the third edition Dragonlance campaign setting, dude. Like, this is I love the campaign setting and I love the lore, and this has it's the setting and the lore, but it was literally put together like a complete and utter moron. I swear, like there's no magic item setting, there's no magic item section. If you want to find particular magic items, they're in like weird sidebars throughout the book. Like all of the main characters, they all have sidebars that aren't in the freaking table of contents. It's irritating. I hate it.
I see you're
I hate
upset.
it. No,
Jesus, dude.
I want my $30 back that I spent at the Wizards of the Coast store in Bridgewater Mall when it was going out of freaking business.
You know what? Tell us how you really feel, man. All right, so, uh, welcome to a totally different podcast, episode 3. I'll let you kind of talk about why we weren't here last week, Jeff.
Yeah, as many of you may know, a very beloved performer that both myself and Michael are good friends with. Um, he's been quite ill, and there was some bad news floating around about him last weekend. The family is requesting that like it's not made too publicly known. So if it's a if you know kind of situation. But for those of you viewing tonight that know, I believe we can all agree when I say fuck cancer. Like fuck cancer. Uh, but as always, I'm Dr. JR.
I'm
That's
Michael
Michael.
OJ. Yeah,
This is Cap.
it's totally cool to take my introduction. No, that's cool. I don't care.
Sorry, I'm currently cat wrangling at the moment. They're being extra rambunctious tonight, but I mean, hey, I'm sure it'll nab us some views because the internet loves cats,
They sure
right?
do. It's a
Internet
publicity
loves
stunt what
cats.
we're doing. So, what are we talking about today?
We are going to be talking about campaign settings, specifically our favorite campaign settings. Originally, we were going to try and cover all the campaign settings,
And then
but
we decided not to.
there's a lot of them, and some of them are really bad.
Yeah, so
Really
I'll like briefly talk about the like history of campaign settings. Initially, D&D was kind of built around these. We have the original Blackmore, the original Greyhawk, of course, where it's a world that you can play your D&D games in if you want to. And that's the big thing about it, right? You can use someone else's inspiration. Now, I've always been a fan of just homebrew everything. I don't think I've ever run a campaign setting, but I've always been fascinated by campaign settings.
Mhm.
Oh, well, that's a lie. I've run Planescape, and that's about it.
Ew. Yeah, I've always been more of a homebrew guy myself. Like there is one campaign setting that I'm kind of the guy in my circle of players that I am known to run. But we'll be talking about that one next week when we do our favorites, our number one top favorites. But tonight we're going to be covering basically we're going to be doing like our top three. So you'll be hearing about two of the ones I really like tonight and two of the ones that Michael really likes tonight.
I do want to talk about briefly like what a campaign what the big campaign setting is right now, and that's called
Mhm.
Forgotten Realms currently. It's possibly the most famous campaign setting. It's not what we're going to be talking about, but it's one that people should know about. It's
Mhm.
most D&D games are set in the Forgotten Realms. I believe Baldur's Gate's set in the Forgotten Realms. And I can think of no other examples. But Baldur's Gate is like the big D&D game. Most D&D that kind of defaults to Forgotten Realms. It kind of has everything. You have like not Asia over here, and like not Arabia over here, and not the Sword Coast over here, and it can fit any flavor you want.
Mhm.
Most of the lore, like I think the most famous books in D&D right now are the Legend of Driz series, which is about a dark elf.
Allow me to groan and roll
I
my
I
eyes.
love them. I love those books so much. But those books are set in the Forgotten Realms, and they're possibly the best-selling D&D books I think ever.
I will. No, we're gonna fight about this in a little bit, Michael. We are gonna fight on
I'm not
this
talking about
one.
best. I'm talking about best-selling, and I don't think that any book has done as well as that by just sheer
I
numbers. The only
you
one
know
that's close is Dragonlance, but I don't think it outsold Driz.
it might have. It depends. It depends on when. Because
Uh,
there was a
current,
time
but
Dragonlance was king, but that's
no,
getting
no,
ahead of
I'm
things
talking about
right
like
now.
overall in general, right? Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I don't think anything beats those books. But those are Forgotten Realms, and Forgotten Realms is a great setting.
Hmm.
If you run it, you love it. If you know it, you love it. It's just not something I'm going to talk about today because it's generic D&D with some cool twists in it. Um,
Exactly.
but we're going to talk about the campaign things that kind of got us going. Um,
Yeah.
and it's the one of the big selling points of D&D. Initially, they found out, hey, how do we make more money out of this game? Well, I made this new world that people can play in with like a
Hmm.
box, and you would get like a whole box with like maps and like star maps occasionally. Do you have your Dark Sun one? Oh, you have your
Actually,
Spelljammer one.
yeah, I have my Spelljammer one handy. Yeah, like they would come. Like the Spelljammer one was really cool. You could allow me to crack it open for a second. Like you would have these big, like mini poster size placards that would cover like the different ships. Like this is the Illithid Dreadnought. You could flip it over; it would have the layout. You would have all of the basic crew. Um, what they were generally equipped with, and so on and so forth. But aside from that, you would have a number of soft cover books. You'd have settings that you would have known characters, like this one's the captains and ships one. But yeah, they would.
That was all in the one box set.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That
okay.
was a single box set, and then afterwards there would be like small soft cover books that you could buy as supplemental material that would be like, hey, this is a new race of space elves, or hey, this is a new type of ship, or hey, this is a solo adventure that you could run. Yay, give us money.
It really is. Give us money. So let's
Mhm.
just open it right up with talking about some of these campaign settings for D&D. And what I love about
Mhm.
these four that we're going to be talking about today is they all
Mhm.
change what D&D is. Because you take these settings and you go, oh, this is a new look on D&D itself, which is
Mhm.
hard to homebrew because you don't really know what the world's capable of. So
Absolutely.
we were talking about Spelljammer. So you want to start with Spelljammer, or do you want to start with the other one?
I'm really keyed up to talk about Dragonlance. Part of why I was waving the awful third edition book in the beginning, because and especially after all your Forgotten Realms nonsense, man. After all of that, I really think I want to kick it off with Dragonlance.
Now, as we learned from episode 2, which if you haven't seen,
Mhm.
please watch. When TSR gets taken over by Warren, she focuses solely on almost Dragonlance and just
Mhm.
Dragonlance. It becomes the publishing king to a point.
Absolutely, and that's kind of why I say I disagree with you on the Forgotten Realms thing. Like Forgotten Realms is slightly senior to Dragonlance because the Realms was part of that 1980 block with Greyhawk and Mystara. Um, but a few years later, in 1983, Ravenloft, Pelennor, and Dragonlance was released. Now, Dragonlance was kind of a product because some of the folks that were brainstorming over at TSR were like, yeah, we're Dungeons and Dragons. We have lots of dungeons. It feels like we're leaving out the dragons. So let's build a setting that's all about the dragons. In
When
fact,
was
we're
the
going to have,
last time? When was the last time one of your campaigns you actually fought a dragon? Because for me, it's like
um,
very rarely just like, oh, it's a dragon. People are like, wow, that's a thing over there.
uh, believe it or not, my game last Friday, we fought an Illithid dragon. It was terrifying.
That doesn't count. That's an illithid who no, that doesn't count.
Oh, whatever. It had a frightful roar, and I murdered it. But anyway, that's all. That's a whole other tangent. But yeah, in late 1983, early 1984, Dragonlance dropped. And it was the brainchild of Margaret Weiss and Tracy and Laura Hickman, who also were part. They also helped develop Ravenloft as well. And you would be able to get like the initial, like there was the Dragonlance box set, and there was the first adventure, Dragons of Despair. And Dragons of Despair was the actual published campaign game that was meant to go along as a sidecar to the Dragonlance novel, The Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Um, the novel Dragons of Autumn Twilight is supposed to be Margaret Weiss, Tracy and Laura Hickman, etc.'s actual playthrough of the Dragons of Despair game. Um, now the funny thing is like Dragonlance has a really interesting flavor that sets it a little bit apart from the realms. Like, yes, it's still both very, very sword and sorcery. However, like Dragonlance has a very unique like it's about the knights, it's about the wizards, it's about honor, you know, and uh, pardon, I'm just gonna breathe it in. It was just such an interesting, fun thing at the time. Um, but yeah, anyway, back Dragons of Despair was specifically their first playthrough of the playtest, or sorry, Dragons of Autumn Twilight was the playthrough of Dragons of Despair, where they actually played all of the main characters from the Dragonlance novels. Now, this was a
Hmm.
very new thing because you know it was there was a game, but there was also all of these books being released. I don't think there were actually Forgotten Realms novels for Forgotten Realms. I think Dragonlance was one of the series or one of the campaign settings that really like popped the cherry with that. And because of that, like Dragonlance was everywhere in the 1980s. You could not open up a Marvel comic and go 4 pages without seeing a Dragonlance ad,
Oh,
whether it was
sure.
for
Yeah.
whether it was
Yeah.
for a computer game, one of the novels, or the campaign setting itself. Um, Sorry, there's a lot and it branches out so much. Uh,
So like, tell us about the actual setting itself.
the
Um,
actual setting itself, it takes place on the world of Kryn, though most of the campaign is set specifically on the continent of Ansalon. The very first campaign setting was in what was called the Age of Despair. Now, there's 5 ages in the setting of Kryn. There's the Age of Dreams, the Age of Might, the Age of Despair, something, and then there's the Age of Mortals. Um, Now, the age of what happened is like in the Age of Might, that was when it's the Dragonlance Genesis. The gods created the earth, and the gods supported the creatures, and they created all of the different races. And the Gray Gem of Gargath was floating around, causing all types of trouble. But there was a faction of religious zealots that were led by a person named by the king priest of Istar that in an act of hubris tried to command and call forth the
that's
power
such a D&D name. I'm the Grand Priest of Ishtar. It's such a
king no
D&D name.
the king priest.
That's such a D&D name.
But yeah, in an act of utter hubris, he demanded the like to command the power of the gods by his own will, and the gods said, "Yeah, we're not doing that." And they drop a fiery mountain on his ass and go away, which is how the Age of Despair begins, where the gods are gone, and
Yeah.
so there were no clerics, there was no
Really?
divine magic.
Really? I didn't
Yeah, there were
You couldn't play a cleric in this game?
Yeah, that's actually the initial Dragons of Despair game. It's all about how the clerics came back.
Oh,
So,
interesting. Interesting. Is this also the one with like the 3 types of wizards, or am I misremembering something else?
yes, yeah,
The
there
white
are
robes, the red robes, and the black robes. Is that this one?
yes,
Okay.
that is absolutely correct. Yeah, there is the Order of High Sorcery, which had the Towers of High Sorcery, which were basically the only places you could go to learn magic. If you were not a tower mage, you were considered a renegade mage, and you would be hunted down and either brought before the Enclave and brought to justice, or you would be killed. Um, and funny enough, like even arcane magic actually has a deific component in Dragonlance, which was kind of weird during the Age of Despair, and why a lot of people don't trust wizards in Kryn, because divine magic was gone, but arcane magic was still there. But arcane magic, according to the wizards, came from the 3 moons of Kryn. Kryn had 3 moons: Solinari, Lunatari, and Nuatari. Solinari being the white moon, Lunatari being the red moon, and Nuatari being the Black Moon,
And
which
it
could
kind
only be seen by evil characters.
so
Ooh.
like I always the wizard thing was fascinating to me because I think it's the dumbest thing ever. Because if I recall, your wizards get to choose which one you follow. So if I'm an evil as shit wizard, I'm
Mhm.
asking for a white robe. not a black robe, so I can walk around and do terrible things.
You couldn't
Why
do
would
that.
I ever pick a black robe?
You have to. You absolutely have to. See, effectively, I think they moved it around a bit for third edition, but in the backstory of your character, to earn your robe, you had to go through a test at the Tower of High Sorcery, where
Oh, okay.
you would be given a number of moral choices that you would have to make, and then depending on what choices you made, you would be
Oh.
either allowed to continue to practice sorcery, and you would be given to one of the orders to be trained, or they would send you on your way if you survived. But more than likely, you would die if you failed. Like taking
Oh,
the
wow.
high sorcery test, that was a big thing. That was a very big thing in Dragonlance. So to be a
Oh.
tower mage, like that means you've seen some shit. My personal favorite character from the Dragonlance
Huh.
series, Raceland Majer, was typically a red robe. Eventually, he became a black robe,
Well,
but
isn't
he was
Raceland like one of the like quintessential D&D bad guys?
um he redeemed himself as I side eye you.
Well,
Um,
I don't
yeah,
actually know who he is, but I hear his name among like Astarak, and I hear his name among like Vecna and like Soth. I hear his name mentioned there as like someone that parties go like, let's go kick his ass.
ooh, no. Well, okay. So the brief history of Raceland in a minute or less was Raceland Majer was once one of a pair of twins. He was the sly one, the Weasley one. He was always sick and frail, whereas his brother Caramon was mega handsome jock. So he always had like a bit of an inferiority complex. He took up sorcery because that was all he had, all he felt he was capable of, and the only way to gain power in this world. And he went down a very dark path. He was influenced by a lich for a while. Eventually he got rid of the lich, decided to take up the black robes, and then said, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to go into the abyss and I'm going to beat the snot out of Takesis and take her place. So he went through 3 novels of him trying to get together the components and the allies he needed to open a portal to Kryn's Abyss to go fight the ultimate god of evil, Takesis, who's basically Tiamat with a few changes. She's a multi-headed dragon goddess.
Sure,
To go
sure.
into the Abyss and fight the most evil god there was so he could kill her and take her place and become immortal. But
Oh, okay, gotcha.
at at the last moment, he has like this big change of heart. He realizes like, holy shit, I've been an awful person. I shouldn't do that. And he stops Takesis. He thwarts a whole bunch of her plans that were happening on Kryn at the moment and closes the portal and effectively sacrifices himself to save Kryn from Takesis. So
So
in later, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, no,
What's up?
no, no, no. So no, the setting's very rich, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it played much anymore. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, that's one of those things I don't want to get into given your that really cool opportunity that you were just telling me about. There's a lot of friction between the original Dragonlance authors and the folks that currently own the copyright. There was a lawsuit very recently which was settled out of court under a lot of like mystery. Nobody knows what happened yet. So, in theory, there's actually supposed to be a 5th edition Dragonlance that's going to be dropping soon, but there's not a lot of details, and there's a bit of a bad air floating around it right now. I have some hope to see it. I am skeptically optimistic to see what they do with it because again, even like the characters that were built throughout all of the novels are beloved like hardcore by a very specific group of D&D fans out there, like me and a small group of my friends really
And no
like.
one else.
And no one, no, I was gonna say, I have a group of friends where the actual Dragonlance novels were like formative things for us. Like some people had like the Lord of the Rings books. I can name like 5 friends that like, no man, Dragonlance Chronicles, that hit me. And it has a lot of relatable characters. I really think you should give it a chance, Mike. specifically because I think you would dig the Knights of Solamnia. The Knights of Solamnia play a really big part in the Dragonlance campaign setting as well. They're all centered around Huma, who was the first great knight who fell in love with a dragon and battled the gods of evil way back in the gods of might. He crafted the first Dragonlance to fight the evil goddess Takesis and sealed her away in the abyss.
I like
And
knights. I like
yeah,
knights.
and eventually he formed the Knights of Solamnia, where their motto is "With Solarius of Mythos," which is "My honor is my life," and they were effectively the Dragonlance version of the Paladins. They were non-magical because, for the most part, they revered Paladin, which was the great god of good and the Platinum Dragon. But they weren't necessarily like monastic, so they didn't really have a lot of divine abilities. And they were separated into three separate orders. There was the Order of the Crown, the Order of the Sword, and the Order of the Rose. And you would have to make your way up through the ranks of the knights. And being the Order of the Rose was the highest order. But there was a lot of weird feelings about the Knights of Solamnia as well, because they were responsible for a lot of witch hunts where they would hunt down the different tower mages. And one of their most famous members of the
church is hunting down witches? Whoa!
Whoa! But they also had a very infamous member, Lord Lauren Soth, who eventually became.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, Knight of the Black Rose is what they call. Oh, I got you. I got you.
You just connected something.
Got
there.
it. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? We're talking about this. Well, I want to hold off on talking about Lord Soth for tomorrow.
Yeah. He just.
Oh, okay. I didn't know he was.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, he was a Knight of the Rose that was given a holy task to stop the King Priest of Istar from calling down the fiery mountain. He was the one chance to stop the Age of Despair, and he failed miserably because he was jealous of his wife. He believed his wife was sneaking around and abandoned his holy quest to go and confront her, and things went really bad, and he was burned alive and brought back for his, as punishment for his failure, as the one of the big bads of Krynn. He was one of the first Death Knights.
That's super neat. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow. Okay. Cool. And yes. So that's your campaign saying that you think is probably even underrepresented. I know a lot of new D&D people don't know Dragonlance, which is a shame.
Weird. Well, like I was saying before, Dragonlance was everywhere in the 80s, but by like 1995, like when second edition was dying down, they were really pushing everything but Dragonlance because people were kind of tired of it at that point.
Yeah.
And when third edition happened, they didn't necessarily renew it right away. And when they finally did drop Dragonlance for third edition, they dropped this abomination. So...
Well, I mean, like, it's so a lot of settings get kind of done dirty that way, I feel like. But I think it's time that we move on to another campaign setting.
Yeah, I could Dragonlance for the rest of the hour,
which is fine. Let's So I brought.
So what do you have?
I brought two to the table today. Okay. I brought Dark Sun and I brought Eberron. I want to talk about Dark Sun first because I think I like Eberron more. So I want to talk about Dark Sun first because it kind of does. It's a setting that I think was able to flip D&D on its head, and kind of put the focus on something very different. Take the world of D&D and make it a dark post-apocalyptic world. Now, initially, Dark Sun. It's called Dark Sun because literally like there's a dark sun in the sky and it's like a desert wasteland, Mad Maxian, post-apocalyptic, sword and sorcerer, Conan the Barbarian. The world is dead. Originally it was called War World because they wanted like to invoke like a Mad Max style. They wanted to invoke like a post-apocalyptic fury, so they want a world where everyone's at war. They didn't go with War World.
I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't Dark Sun the setting where they recommended create 3 characters when you make a character because they're going to die?
They're going to die. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dark Sun was one of them. Dark Sun made a bunch of mistakes, though. Um,
Okay.
and I'll talk about the one mistake I think they made that some games just haven't done well.
Hmm.
But when you look at the cover for Dark Sun, you see like it's like a broken world. There's like this hobgoblin with like two scythes, and he's running at you, and there's a bunch of like dead bodies all around. Well, this has to
Hmm.
do with the way they handle magic, and magic in this world is called defiling. And the way magic works in Dark Sun is if I cast a spell, it's essentially like I'm drawing from a finite resource. So if you picture like a magic as like a fossil fuel, when I cast a spell, I am draining a very minute part of the planet's lifespan.
Hmm.
Now, of course, for thousands of years, we have existed and we've been fine. Now, people knew this was happening. When you start playing Dark Sun, the world is already used up. There's no, like, very little plants, very little animals, and everybody is living in these barren worlds. The reason why the world fell is because of these sorcerer kings. And I think there's like 12 of them, and they each run a small walled-in city-state. These dudes have found a way to reach immortality through magic. And their biggest thing is they have found a way to drain the world, drain other people. They can take life forces from people because they only care about themselves. They've achieved greatness, and they are the most powerful wizards. Like I think the top guy is in AD&D was like a level 26 wizard and like a level 15 sorcerer. Like he was like something crazy. One of them is like a literal dragon who just like hangs out in the desert. One of them's like a shifter who can turn to animals. But these dudes have all controlled certain cities. In the first book, it was called Freedom, the first campaign book.
Hmm.
And in Freedom, you were like leading a slave revolt. So very clearly, this is a world where nothing's like we know D&D. Magic is mistrusted. And if you meet a mage, you didn't call them a mage, you called them a defiler.
A defiler. Yep.
Yeah, defiler. Yeah. There's a small sect of people who I think you were supposed to play as called preservers, who were basically like, we're trying to actually save the planet. But defiling was just so much easier. Things like if you wanted your wizard to cast scry, you had to bring him like a plant, a plant, and he would like devour the plant and then cast his spell. That's how you would cast spells in this game. Things like water being a thing that your character like create water, not really a thing here, right? You can't just create water. Clean water was like a treasure gift, not because your party needed it, because it sold well.
You know what this kind of sounds like? It almost sounds like Final Fantasy VII meets Dune.
Dune was a heavy inspiration for this, by the way.
Hmm.
It very clearly was very Dune-esque, and you are fighting against the bonds of these sorcerer kings, and they are binding the people to their will. Slavery is very common. The races are all these tough guys. Like there's the Thrycreen, who are like bug people, and I love them because they're bug people. I like anytime I get to play as bug people. There are like half giants, so the first time they're playable.
Hmm.
Halflings were all cannibals. That was like a racial thing. Like if you played a halfling, you were a cannibal. You subsisted primarily off flesh. And it had to be from like living creatures that died recently. So you'd have like these like halfling headhunters walking around like eating people. Like roaming the wastes. You would have like nomadic tribes being formed, barbarians fighting for sovereignty. Dark Sun is a world that isn't playing nice.
Hmm.
When you made your character, you also rolled for a particular thing. Most people who were powerful in this world were psionic, because psionic, you weren't defiling. You could just do it. Now, this led to apparently some fun tabletop situations where people like, yeah, I rolled up my character, got home, and I got 3 18s, and I'm a psionic. I rolled this up at home. I got a bunch of 20s. That happened apparently all the time.
Well, I believe it happened all the time because it was actually encouraged, again, because of how fatal the setting could be. You
it,
needed those hyper powerful characters, otherwise you would die.
Oh yeah, and part of it was like this like, ideology of like, will you join the Sorcerer Kings, or will you go against them? Ideally, you're supposed to go against them. That's kind of like what
Mhm.
people think Dark Sun is. But like, when you got powerful enough, apparently like the Sorcerer Kings will be like, hey, do you want a job? Like, I'll give you a job. You want to like hang out with us? Believe it or not, Dark Sun was the first ever D&D game I played. I played 4th edition. Dark Sun was the first ever game I ever played.
Rad. Was Dark Sun actually released for fourth edition,
Yes, it was.
or
Yes, it was.
okay?
It was the initial. So the initial storyline involved a sorcerer king named Calic, and he was like the main guy. Usually, most of the story took place in a city called Tyr, like the Norse god of justice, Tyr.
Mhm.
Most of the games took place there. Now, the 4th edition one I thought was fun. You could play as a Thicreen, and it was brutal and it was fun, and I was like, man, this is pretty awesome. You could play as like this is the first time in 4th edition where tieflings showed up. I think it was the first time where tieflings show up. Period. Was the original Dark Sun. For second edition D&D. The Eladrin, the first time they show up. The Half Giant, first time they show up. The Thicreen, first time they show up. I think they show up in anything else.
Did you say thigh cream?
3 no. No, but the setting was such a fascinating world. Now, Athos was the name of the planet that Dark Sun was on. No deities. You could not be a cleric. It was not allowed because the gods had abandoned this place. They said, "Oh, look at Dark Sun. All right, we're leaving. Where do you guys want to go next? Dragonlands? Dragonlands. Oh, Forgotten Realms? Let's go there." So the gods have left. And the only gods around are these Sorcerer Kings. In fact, there was a class you could play in the initial game called Templar, and you were a Templar of the Sorcerer Kings. You were like, they would imbue you with powers as like a gift. It would be like this holy ritual you would do. And when you got imbued by this holy ritual, you would be able to go out and actually do things. And so you were like paladins and clerics of these guys, which is such a cool concept because you could meet them. And they were all like evil as shit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what Dark Sun did that I think was a mistake was the meta plot. This is the first game where they made a meta plot. And a meta plot is essentially every book that you would be released, they would tell you what happened in the last book, in the canon ending, and then advance the plot line at like a year or so. Sometimes it was like a month, sometimes it was a year. It could change. This led to people, lovers of Dark Sun, going, I love this setting. I just want to know what happens. But it led to weird situations at the tabletop. Let's say we were playing Freedom, the first module, which didn't do so well. It's actually not the Graven module. We played through Freedom, and let's say we decided to side with Calic. Okay, that was like the whole thing. And the book 2 starts with, so after you started the slave revolt against Calic, like you had to have done what was done previously in the canon ending to play the next module properly.
That's irritating, but that's happened in a lot of other campaign settings.
Oh, War of the Darkness. War of the Darkness. It's literally how they do all their books. But this led to a lot of people being like really turned off. Now, of course, good DMs were like, so here's what happens next, and that's kind of what they wanted. But it tried this meta plot. In fact, the 4th edition tried to advance the meta plot. I think the 4th edition one starts with like Calic just died, and you're like seeing what you do from the other side. But it's a very cool campaign setting. Defiling, preserving, savages running around the woods, the desert, sorry. Yeah, no, I loved it. And it also was made to sell the complete Psionic Handbook. Part of the reason was it's like, hey, do you want actually to be used magic? Well, here's a complete Psionic Handbook, which we hate, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really don't like the complete Psionic Handbook.
Yeah, and that's honestly what kept me away from playing a lot of Dark Sun, because like I have a couple of friends that are diehard Dark Sun friends or diehard Dark Sun fans. Hi Jeffrey, if you're watching. But yeah, the whole how psionics were so ubiquitous throughout the whole setting, it just really turned me off because I don't like psionics. So
go on. No, there's actually one more piece of D&D history that was started because of Dark Sun. In 3rd edition, there was no Dark Sun campaign setting. Now, a small group got their start writing it. That was Piazzo Publishing, who would end up making Pathfinder. Their first big project was Dark Sun 3rd edition.
I see. That's why I don't like Pathfinder.
I love Pathfinder. But yeah, so that's Dark Sun. And you're right, psionics are so prevalent in the system, but it's just a neat way to spin D&D on its head and put this dark and oppressive world down. War World!
War World would have been cooler. So, shall I take us to space, Michael?
Woo!
Let's go to space. The one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space.
I love Tim Curry. Space.
So yeah, and one of the
I like how in that video he can't say his line without laughing. They were like, "Use the tank."
You could see the snicker. But before I dive into outer space here, one of the cool things I noticed is like I'm looking at the timeline again of like all of the release dates, and it kind of shows a bit of the generation gap between you and I, because I'm looking at my top three picks and what your top three picks are, and literally my three picks end when your three picks begin, which I find kind of fun. So anyway, Spelljammer is D&D in
In
space.
space!
We need
With
Neko
mind
effects.
flayers, the coolest thing ever, which I stand by, are the coolest thing ever.
They are a phenomenal villain. Yeah,
And
Spelljammer.
and super copyrighted.
Yep.
Super copyrighted. So are beholders. Super copyrighted. Discovered that working at the Open Gaming license. You can't use that.
Ever.
Nor you can use the word you can use the word super illithid.
Really?
Yeah, so
Weird.
illithid and like neothid are copyrighted, but if you add a word in front of him and just be like, this is a mind flayer, he does something special. Whatever. Flayer of minds, that's not copyrighted. You can just use even just mind flayer stats. But
weird.
Yeah, like you on T are copyrighted to DM copyrighted. Yeah. That's why if you open up a third party book, it always says game master or storyteller. That's why.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, so Spelljammer dropped in 1989, and the whole idea behind Spelljammer, besides space, was it was meant to draw all of the different D&D campaign settings together. It was supposed to give you a way, if you wanted to go to Terrell and you were on Kryn, you could take a spelljamming ship. If you wanted to go to the Hollow, or if you wanted to go to Dark Sun or Al-Qadim, spelljamming ship. And then eventually, as even more campaign settings came out, boom, spelljamming ship.
Wait, so really, so with Spelljammer, you could travel to any world that you wanted?
If you could get there, yes. Because obviously with like other sci-fi settings, you would need star charts, you would need the ship, you would need the equipment, you would need the supplies, etc., etc. Now, since Spelljammer is D&D in space, the thing is they decided not to really go with a lot of real world science, which is what kind of got people. It's why Spelljammer, either you love it or you hate it, and I attribute a lot of that to the wonky ass physics in it. Like,
woo!
All of the different D&D realms exist throughout wild space. There are different crystal spheres that the different D&D campaign worlds would exist in. Like, you would have to travel to this crystal sphere and you would find Kryn and other planets that would possibly like share that crystal sphere.
So can you like land in Dark Sun and just start like nuking like Sorcerer Kings from the sky, or just like take out Lord Soth in a spaceship?
In theory, yes.
That sounds awesome. In fact, the new Baldur's Gate game has spelljamming ships in it.
Yes. I was actually just looking at that because I was curious to see like what the current state of Spelljammer is in, because even Dragonlance got a 3rd edition treatment. Spelljammer hasn't been touched since TSR went away. The copyright or anything hasn't. It's been dormant since then. But there's rumors and hope that there's possibly going to be something for 5th edition. So fingers crossed. But yeah, back to what I was saying is Spelljammer was really meant to bring together all of the different D&D worlds, and you would be able to travel between these worlds by the use of a spelljamming ship. Now, the cool thing with a spelljamming ship is your ship could be anything so long as it had what was called a helm. Now, in most cases, the helm was like a weird fancy chair or something like that, where the pilot would sit and operate the ship. Now, the pilot had to be a spellcaster of some sort. Depending on the helm, you could have divine spellcasters, arcane spellcasters. I had a ranger with spellcasting ability once that was like a fighter pilot for a while. You had to have some sort of command of magic in order to pilot a spelljamming ship. You'd sit in the chair, and the helm would make you become one with the ship, and you would cast spells and allow your magic to pilot the ship. Yeah, dude, it was really rad. And because of that, you could stick a helm in just about anything. Like my current Friday night game, our spelljamming ship is basically just a galleon that we stuck a helm on. But
Yeah, it was.
mhm. Illithids have like more of like a all of the Illithid ships look like something out of an H.R. Geiger art book. Where
Yeah,
it's
they're like tentacle, like mollusk looking ships.
yep. Some of the humans and even the Neogi out there, they had like ships that look like bugs. Elves have ships that look like butterflies because of course they do. Um, Dwarves, I think, fly around in like little flying mountains with forges in them.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, dude, like they really like some of the racial flavor, like D&D racial flavor that they put into some of the ships is so ridiculous.
Well, what would a dwarf fly? If I was gonna think of something, I'd be like, it would have an anvil, and they would like hammer it a bunch, and it would be like a big rock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of how a lot of them work. They would have like what's called furnace helms, where the pilot actually would have to sit there and either be forging something or shoveling coal into it in order to pilot the ship. But there was also what's called death jammers, where they would like drain life force from slaves in order to pilot the ships. That was an Illithid thing. Yeah, there was a whole bunch. I have the thing open here of all of the different types of helms. Now, helms were worth thousands and thousands and thousands of gold pieces, and they were originally created by the Arcane, which was like a proto race in D&D that effectively created spell jamming as a way to travel around. But yeah, there's the death helm I talked about. There's the pump helm that you need to feed like all kinds of elemental material into. Yeah, Artifurnace, where you have to feed it magical artifacts. And there's a really, really rare one that was just known as a crown of stars, where it was, a crown or, some other piece of clothing you could effectively use to pilot your spell jamming ship while not being bound to the chair. So you could go around with your little happy hat and pilot your ship around while you're, in the mess hall or whatever and doing your.
Oh, that's cool. Thing. That's cool. Yeah. Now, and so was Spelljammer a system that I would like add to a game, or would I be specifically playing Spelljammer? Like, was it something that I grew my party is hanging out in Dragonlance, and I go, hey guys, you find like this helm, we're playing Spelljammer now.
That's always seems to be how it's happened in my gaming experience. Spelljammer did have its own setting where it effectively played like a weird version of Star Trek, where there were different factions, different fleets. It was the first appearance of a race known as the Gif, which were like big hippopotamus people.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, the Gif are native basically to space.
They like fight. We're talking about like the Githyanki and the Githzerai, right?
No, Gif, GIFF.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, it sounds very similar, and it's an easy mistake to make. But yeah, slightly different. Hip Hop Anonymous people. But yeah, there was a way to just effectively play Spelljammer as if you were playing like you would be a member of the Human Alliance, and you would go out into space and you would explore the different worlds, and you could use whatever homebrew worlds you wanted. There were specific like smaller and lesser like planes and planets that you could land on, or you could just do wild space stuff where there's ship to ship combat and all sorts of other nonsense.
How was the ship to ship combat?
Cumbersome, dude. It was second edition.
Yeah, oh dude, I bet. I super bet.
Yeah, dude, like looking at this stuff, there's just charts upon charts, and like unfortunately with Spelljammer, since it was D&D, you didn't have like, oh cool, fire the photon torpedoes, set your phasers to kill. There was none of that. Like you would have ballistas, you would have catapults, or you would have one of my favorites, you would have jettisons, where you would shoot your garbage at enemy ships, or some ships came equipped with what was called rams, where you would literally just go and like stab other ships with your ship.
So it's that's one thing that I'm talking about when we get to like to like Eberron, but D&D is so hesitant to put guns in their game, like so hesitant to just be like, it's a gun, it fires a thing. I have a spaceship. What do I have? I have a catapult attached to it. Okay, can I have a gun? No, guns aren't a thing. But the spaceship's a thing? I can have a spaceship. I don't have a small projectile weapon?
It's a magic spaceship, Michael. It's magic. I mean, come on. If you actually look at the old second edition player's handbook, there were rules for the arquebus. They were rare, they were expensive, they would kill you, and they sucked because they would blow up in your face.
Well, so like there is some science fiction things that have been published in D&D. I think of
Mhm.
Expedition to the Barrier Peaks as an example, which everyone
Mhm.
who played AD&D at least tried to run at least once. It was a thing written by Gary Gygax, and like an alien spaceship lands, but it's like a legitimate one. So you get like
Mhm.
ray guns and like space marine power armor, and you just like run around and just start blowing stuff up with ray guns and power armor. It's apparently awesome. But why
Mhm.
didn't Spelljammer have this?
I don't know, dude. I do not know. Which is funny because now that you mention it, I remember there was actually a weird entry in the third edition Dungeon Master's Guide that actually there's rules for like ray guns and stuff, and I guess that's why, because Expedition to the Barrier Peaks was such a big hit. Um,
So yeah, so yeah, we have it in space. Is there? I know the Mind Flayers are a major villain in it too, which is so cool.
Mind Flayers are a major villain. Them, the Beholders, and the Nyogi. The
The
Nyogi were like
Beholders have ships.
the Beholders have ships. Yeah, the cool thing is Spelljammer was really big on its aberrations, but yeah, both the Mind Flayers and the Nyogi. The Nyogi kind of effectively were like the Ferengi, if you know your Star Trek, where they had really intricate like trade rules and acquisition rules. But both them and the Mind Flayers were very heavy on being slave takers. So if you saw a Nyogi ship, if you saw a Mind Flayer ship, either you are preparing for a fight or you run.
Well, they
Um,
show something really cool in the new Baldur's Gate game where like the tentacle just touches you and it telepathically zaps you to the ship, and it was so cool to see.
yeah, that was I believe an Illithid dreadnought, and yeah, that's they're all about. Or was that a mollusk? I forget.
It was called a Nautilus.
Nautilus, that's it. But yeah,
That's what it was.
those guys were effectively, yeah, they are meant for one purpose, and that is harvesting slaves, which is one of the really big things that we're laying into on the campaign that I'm playing in right now. We are actually under deep cover on the Illithid homeworld right now, and my character, who is an escaped Illithid slave, has gone full on like Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, like, no, we're getting out of here, all of us. So I'm probably going to get the whole party killed trying to rescue everybody on the planet. But yeah, Illithids are huge in Spelljammer, and they are a terrifying force.
They are my
Um,
favorite enemy in D&D. I love them. But it's such a cool concept. Like, hey, let's have D&D in space.
yeah,
And from what I understand, the fan base is still very much there.
yeah, and that's the thing. There are so many people that have been crying for it. There's so many. If you look online, there's so much errata and homebrew that people have been coming up with to keep the setting alive. Because Wizards of the Coast, like since acquiring TSR, they have done nothing with the property, nothing at all. But I could rattle on about
Well,
space and.
the other thing is
Mhm.
Spelljammer was overshadowed by the other setting that lets you jump from location to location, which
The
is
other inferior setting
my
that
favorite
allows you
setting.
to jump from location to
Well,
location.
no, like ignoring the fact it's my favorite setting and you hate it. It was the one that Wizards kind of went with, and they were like, "This is the one that we're gonna keep progressing." And we'll talk about that one tomorrow. It's Planescape, by the way. It's my
Mhm.
favorite, but we'll talk about Planescape tomorrow. We done with space.
Yeah, I think that's a good stopping point. Again, I could go on ad nauseum about Spelljammer because it's fun.
So the last setting I want to talk about is my second favorite setting in D&D, despite the fact I played very little of it.
Mhm.
I like it for its concepts, and I think they have built. If I had to pick a setting that was the most unique, I would talk about Eberron. And it does something initially that I love what it does. I love it because it defines a lot, but doesn't define everything. And what I mean by that is, so the initial lore of Eberron is there's these three dragons. Uh, one's like called Kyber, and he turns into like the underworld. Then there's Eberron, who's another dragon. One of them is like blown up and sent to space. The dragons had a war, and the bodies became the surface world and the Underdark, respectively.
Mhm.
This world says when people think of Eberron, they think of like airships. There's airships everywhere. Or they think of like undead nations that have risen up. Or they think
Mhm.
of like literal mafia families walking around with like fantasy like coats and ties. They think of like um halflings on dinosaurs, which is something that everyone thinks about when they think about it. Eberron at least once. They think about the Warforged, these like playing as an AI creature, and it's still called AI. It's arcane intelligence is what AI stands for in this one, and they made robots. But the premise of Eberron is there was a world where 5 nations who kind of fit into like the standard um, types of governments. So like one is like Onder, and they're like a wizard scholarly place. There's Braylon, which is a cosmopolitan world. There's Karnath, which is like we're like conquering militaries, but we're also vampires and undead, and we're pretty awful. And then there was Thrain, who was like the I am the church, and there was a place called Seer, who was like the head of the world. Long story short, Seer gets like magically nuked, and they mention like magical radiation, and it's basically like Hiroshima just happened, and everyone went, "All right, maybe we shouldn't be doing this anymore. You want to sign a peace treaty?" And so it's if World War One ended with an atomic bomb, and we're gearing up for World War Two. When Eberron starts, it's been 3 years since the last war, and no one's forgotten the war, and everyone's like trying to one up each other. And the mobs have taken over locations. No one likes each other. Technology's been increasing, and that's Eberron. What they do that I love is they tell players to stop assuming things. They say, hey, dark elves are a thing. They aren't necessarily evil. Orcs are like druids, and they like are like run banks. You can have a beholder who's just like hanging out, being with his friends. You can have a mind flayer who like runs an orphanage and doesn't like steal people's brains. They say all these things that exist in D&D are here, but they're not what you think they are, and we're not going to define what they are. So if you're a player in the game, if you meet a orc, you don't be like, evil barbarian, or you meet a mind flayer, it's like, psionic monster. That might be like a spy for an empire. That might be a friend who's helping you out. And that's why I love Eberron so much. They say stop overthinking things and just do what the DM says. And because it's built into the setting, it worked really well.
Neat. Now this has been fun because like I've never paid any attention to Eberron whatsoever. I mean, the only thing I saw I saw the war not Warforged the
Warforged, yeah.
I saw the Warforged race, and I think that's really cool. But I've never really bothered with any of the lore of it. And now that you're telling me about it, I'm going to look at Eberron.
No, so
cool.
there's a lot of really cool stuff. Each of the nations they wanted to make very unique.
Mm-hmm.
So like the theocracy is like the inquisitorial church after World War One.
Mm-hmm.
I love there's a city called Sharn and Brayland, which is like cyberpunk meets like noir fantasy, and like you're like people walk around like suits and ties, investigators, photojournalists, trains. There's trains everywhere and airships leading you to places. Like there's like train heists with like dragons that jump trains. Like there's a whole group of like dragon train jumpers.
That's exciting.
There's a whole town that's like run like Don Corleone's mafia. It's like New York City. If it's run by Don Corleone, there's like a not Don Corleone who runs the city. They have like a nation of like goblins. Goblins used to be like who owned everything, and then other nations started beating the shit out of them until they were just like, yeah, we quit. And then they like had a whole nation of like, hey, these are goblin mercenaries, and they realized, hey, wait, the war is about to end. This is our land now, and we own it, and we're sovereign and independent, and you can't say anything about it. Stab. There is a location in this world where the dwarves have dug too deep and they found like aberrations and like Lovecraftian horrors and are fighting off them in like their basements. There's like the land of Sharn that got nuked is like the Dark Souls like creepy Undeadburg where like souls are like walking around and everything's haunted and feels weird. There's so much in this world that leads to people getting their imaginations really sparked. When people read the Eberron book, they see like, oh, this is high tech, and it's low tech, right? It's not high tech. It's low tech. You can be an artificer. You can have like build catapults. There's a race called Changeling where you could like just change your appearance and you were like a spy for a kingdom and espionage. There was a thing called dragon marks in the in the original book where there were great houses. And let's say my race had a subclass. This is a third edition guide. Let's say I was like an orc and I wanted to pick a new subclass. I wasn't like a feral orc or like a mountain dwarf. I would pick a dragon mark, and that would give me a whole new class. So, for example, if I took one class, I would just become a cleric. So I didn't need to be a cleric at all. Anyone could take one of these marks and have magic. So you could be like a fighter and be like, I also have a whole bunch of spells now. I could be a ranger and be like, oh, I have the full cleric spell list now because I was born to one of these great houses. You could be like walking on the street and there might be a guy who you try to mug and whips out a tattoo and fireballs you. Like that was the setting of Eberron.
Whips out a tattoo.
Yeah. So in order to cast spells, you had a tattoo of a dragon mark. It was on your arm, and you would literally flash your thing, and you'd cast the spell through the tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like fifth edition kind of missed the mark on the Warforged, at least. In the original game, they couldn't be healed by like their big downside was you couldn't cast healing spells on them. You couldn't be stabilized. Like people couldn't medicine check you to stabilize you, but if you died, they can just like rebuild you. So your character will get iced in a fight. They just bring you back and be like, I would like to fix him. Thank you.
We can rebuild him. Better.
You super
stronger,
can.
Faster.
You super can. And they were just these like AI who were just hanging out, being AI.
Yeah, one of my favorite D&D streaming crews, Dicebreaker. One of their characters plays a Warforged whose name is Robert O'Cop, who was a lawman at in his previous job. Whom I find utterly hilarious. It's such a neat idea for a race. I've always enjoyed constructy things as races, which I will be happy to get to tear into next week for my favorite setting. But anyway.
Yeah, no, that's what I love about Eberron. Now, the one thing I don't like about Eberron is they still don't have guns. Like, there's airships and like nukes, and they're like, we don't have guns. Like, unless you're an artificer, where you get like a big f-off gun that's like massive and like takes people out. Mm-hmm. But like, no one invented a pistol. Really, no one invented a pistol. Like, we invented pistols in like the 1600s because we realized it worked. No one was like, hey, I have black powder. And I put in the thing. Actually, this guy have an artificer, and he has this gun thing, and it appears real easy to work. Oh, can we just get those? No one asked that. So it's weird. Like everyone's busting like swords and sorcery, but they're in a D&D universe with like airships. I guess do you have any questions about Eberron? Because it's a saying I know that's new to you, or like how games are structured, or anything like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Like. Like what you haven't, like I'm trying to think of what you might not have covered about it already. Like how are, like you said that things, words, English, speak it, JR. You said that a lot of Eberron, the typical like monsters and things aren't necessarily like as you view them. Is there anything that's like brought over that like hands down like dragons are still a big thing and dragons are evil, or for some reason like Aasimar are always evil for whatever reason? Like, is there anything like that really stands out?
So you can think kind of the only ones that really stand out are the changelings, the shifters, mm-hmm. and the Warforged. Who kind of like they are a thing that exists, and this is kind of how they are. But it was intentionally made like a red dragon might be friendly and a bronze dragon might be evil.
Okay.
You don't know by meeting them. Like bronze dragons might hang out together. Like dark elves are just like over there. You can hang out with them, and they're not necessarily this creepy, evil matriarchal society. You can just like, hey, you're a dark elf. You're just from a different part of the world than me. That's kind of cool. It's more about city states, and it's not what I am. It's where I'm from. So, and except the one nation where like all halflings ride dinosaurs. That's like a thing you get. If you actually played a halfling, you got a dinosaur.
What?
Yeah, you could get like there was a whole like thing, like a variant race that was just Eberron specific, where you got like a pet dinosaur and you like rode him around, and you had like a velociraptor, and you rode him around and you killed people with him.
Sold. I need to play in an Eberron game. I want to be a dino riding halfling. That is the coolest thing I have ever heard.
And there's so much in the setting that makes you go, wow. And you could explore one little area of Eberron and have no clue what's going on anywhere else. And you're just like, yeah, I do this one thing. I like the halfling stuff. There's robots? That's cool. Where did they show up? There's a nation of undead where they run it through capitalism. The nation, like, no, so like they go up to you while you're alive and they're like, hey, will you sell your undead body to the workforce of Karnath? And like you sign up, give you gold, and then they come collect when you die and they animate you and turn you into your body into like an undead worker.
Wow, undead capitalism. It's so much like real capitalism.
And it's like a really effective thing. It's like, hey, I'm not using the body after I die. And they're like, we're not actually unethical necromancers. There is a place that's just evil. It's called the Demon Waste, and it's full of like evil as shit demons who do evil things. And everyone's just like, why are you allowed in society? But yeah, no, dino riding halflings, robots, and noir.
All right, I can dig that. That's really cool.
So those are just my two things I want to touch on because they alter D&D, and I think turning D&D in its head is sometimes a really good thing to do. And like any story, as a GM, what you should do is take the stories that you like and parts you don't like. Run Dark Sun, run Dragonlance. You don't like something, change it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this thing gives you. It gives you a toolkit. I found the Eberron setting, just reading it, gave me a lot of ideas of being like, oh, I like this. Oh, that sounds really cool. I can make a whole thing out of that. But yeah, that is essentially Eberron.
Cool. I'm going to have to give Eberron an honest chance then, because it was one of those things that came out like at the height of 3rd edition, and I just didn't want anything to do with it at the time. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I can dig it.
All right, I think we're at time.
Yeah, I was about to say that, I believe, brings us right to time. All right, so friends and fans, thank you so much for joining us this week. We'll be back next week where we'll be continuing our conversation on our favorite campaign settings, where I'll be talking about my personal favorite, Ravenloft. Surprised anyone? And Michael will be talking about his, which is?
I like Planescape.
Of course you do.
I really do.
All right, but friends and fans, as always, if you enjoyed our content tonight, I'm Dr. J.R. Whitcomb.
I'm Michael Oj.
But if you think we suck, this has been a totally different podcast. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.